Hi everyone, and welcome to this Rally webinar, 4 candidate experience mistakes that you absolutely can fix. I'm Lori Sylvia with Rally Recruitment Marketing, and I want to thank all of you for joining us today. Today's webinar is being brought to you in partnership with InFlight. And InFlight is one of our newest sponsors in the Rally community. They provide a pre-hire to retire employee experience platform that enables organizations to create a next generation candidate experience and digital workplace using the ATS, HCM, and HR applications that they already have in place. The InFlight team knows a lot about improving career sites and the candidate experience, and I'm excited to partner with them to bring educational webinars and resources like these to you. So here's what you learned today. We're going to cover 4 common candidate experience mistakes that every company can fix. How to ensure your candidate experience reflects your employer brand promise, and ways to reduce friction in your apply process to stop losing great talent. And at the end, we'll have a live Q&A with our speakers. So let's get started. Today's speakers are Paul Boyette, Global Head of Talent Acquisition at Corteva Agriscience, and Adam Glassman, Senior Manager of Employment Brand at Cox Enterprises. Hi, Paul and Adam.
Good afternoon.
Great. Thank you both for being here. Paul, why don't you start by introducing yourself and telling us all about Corteva Agriscience.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. By way of introductions, I'm an HR talent leader and have been a student of our profession for a long time, and I help organizations deliver best-in-class talent acquisition solutions that really focus on improving the candidate and hiring manager experience through streamlined people, process, and technology solutions. I really believe and am passionate about the important role that we have in talent acquisition in building great organizations. On June 1st of this year, Corteva Agriscience officially spun off from what was our parent company of DowDuPont to be an independent agricultural company that's traded on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol CTVA. Corteva itself is a new 200-year-old startup agriculture company. Our purpose is really to enrich the lives of those who produce and those who consume around the world, and ensuring progress for generations to come. We have a team of over 20,000 team members in 130 countries and 140 world-class R&D facilities, and we really have the kind of leadership, heritage, products, and resources and partner network to really make a meaningful impact on the world's food supply now and into the future.
Awesome. I'm so excited that you're here, Paul, because I don't think that we've had a webinar speaker who's gone through this kind of M&A transition that you guys have gone through, so I think you can bring that unique perspective as well as the other tips that you're going to share with us about candidate experience and career site. So thanks again for being here.
My pleasure.
And Adam, thank you for being a mentor in the Rally Recruitment Marketing community. So for those of you who don't know Adam, it would be great, Adam, if you could introduce yourself and also tell us a bit more about Cox Enterprises.
Sure. So like you said, Lori, my name is Adam Glassman, and I lead the employment brand and recruitment marketing team here at Cox. And for those of you who may not be familiar with Cox, we're one of the top privately held organizations in the country, but also one of the country's best kept secrets. We're about a $21 billion organization across the globe. We have about 55,000 employees, and we're all working towards building a better future for the next generation. And that's really one of our core values and one of the North Stars that we all point towards. And we do that in a couple of different ways across the industries in which we work, in the communities where we live, helping the environment, but also building great careers for our employees. And I'm happy to be here today.
Great. Thanks so much. So let's start by looking at the 4 candidate experience mistakes we'll be discussing today. We all know that the candidate experience starts long before someone lands on your career site and lasts all the way through to when they get hired. But your career site plays an important role in the candidate journey, and therefore it strongly influences how a candidate perceives your company as an employer. So for today's webinar, we're going to focus on candidate experience mistakes that are primarily happening on the career site. And as Paul, Adam, and I collaborated for this webinar in the last couple of weeks, we came up with this list of 4 common candidate experience mistakes that we see across the industry. 1, a career site that looks and feels disconnected from your brand. 2, making it too hard for candidates to discover jobs that are the right fit for them or to decide if working at your company is the right fit. 3, an apply process that is filled with friction that frustrates candidates and causes them to abandon their application. And 4th, failure to manage expectations, both with candidates, of course, but also with your internal teams about what type of candidate experience your company is committed to. And I really appreciate in advance that Paul and Adam will openly share the mistakes that their old career sites were making and will show us some before and after images and importantly tell us what they did to fix those common mistakes. So as I mentioned, mistake number 1 is disconnected from the brand. And we don't just mean your employer brand. We mean your overall corporate brand because they're not just connected. In many ways they are the same thing. So Adam, why don't you tell us why this is so important and how your old career site was making this mistake and the steps you took to fix it?
Sure. So you talk a little bit about the brand versus the employment brand. Depending on your organization, the way I look at it is really they're 2 sides of the same coin, right? They should mirror each other. They should reflect each other. They don't have to be exactly the same, and that's okay. And in many instances, they probably shouldn't be, depending on what your organization and what your corporate brand does. But your consumer and your corporate brand should feel very much in line with your employment brand. And so at the beginning of 2018, so very early on last year, Cox announced a new CEO was taking over the company, Alex Taylor. And with his arrival, he brought a new vision for the company, and that's what I mentioned at the time, which was really to build a better future for the next generation. And so as our corporate brand started to reflect that, we quickly realized that our employment brand was disconnected from that as well. And so where we looked at the corporate website probably mid last year, this was a screenshot of what the corporate website looks like. Lori, if you go ahead to the next slide, this is what our career site looked like. So it was disconnected in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, from a look and feel, I think that's the easiest thing to pick up and to notice that there's major differences between the design and the aesthetics. But perhaps more importantly, the content and what we were saying was disconnected. So there's traditionally been a little bit of a misunderstanding of who Cox is and just the scope and the impact that the company has. I mentioned we're one of the top privately held organizations in the country, but we really don't talk about ourselves very often. And so many people out in our markets didn't really understand the breadth of services and businesses that we have under our umbrella, as well as the different career opportunities that afforded to them. And so we came about this in a couple of different ways to look at bringing the design, the voice and tone back in line with what the overall company brand is, but also revamping our content and the story that we were telling. And so with that, this is what the redesigned career site looked like. So it leverages the core tagline of building a better future. I think that plays very nicely from a candidate perspective as well, because you'll join the company, you'll build a better future for your communities and the industries where we work, but also build a better future for yourself. Build a better future in your career and have opportunities that you can't have elsewhere. So that really started to become some of our rallying cry and focal point within a lot of our content. And so from a content perspective, we worked very hard over the last 12 or 15 months to double or even triple the amount of content that we were sharing on our career site. Everything from videos to the photos that we were showing, employee testimonials, and just straight line copy that explained who the company was, what our business units did, how we were aligned, and really how we were impacting the community and telling a better story of why Cox is an amazing place to work. So I mentioned there are a couple of things to look for when you're determining if you're disconnected from the brand and what to do if you find that you are disconnected. The first and probably the easiest piece is the design and the visual. So are you using the right color palette, the right fonts, the right visual identity that aligns with your corporate brand and your overall company brand? Next is your tone and your voice. So how are you talking to your candidates? And again, this could be an instance where by design you may want to be a little bit intentionally different from your corporate brand. That's something that you have to figure out for your own employment brand and the candidates that you're trying to attract, but making sure there's intention there behind your tone and your voice and where that fits within your brand guidelines. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, is the story you're telling. So how are you describing the company? How are you appealing to candidates? Is that in line with what your core purpose and your core vision for the company is? And how do you tell that story in a broader, deeper way?
Great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I'm so glad that we started this discussion with content, because it's the number one thing that I hear practitioners say they need to work on. And I think this mistake doesn't necessarily require a technical solution or an agency or a big team to fix, although getting some extra resources will help this improvement. But it can be a matter of copywriting and taking a few real photos of your office and employees, and that alone will make an improvement in your career site, but obviously in the candidate experience and making sure that your story is being very authentic to who the company really is. So thanks, Adam, for kicking this off.
Sure, and I agree, Lori, 100%. I mean, one of the goals for employment brand is to be authentic and show a genuine picture of what the work environment is and who the company is. So the more you can do that, the closer you are to that goal.
Great. All right, well, Paul, why don't you share with us how Corteva Agriscience has handled this issue?
Sure, thank you, Lori. Just to kind of bring back to some of my introductory comments, in 2015, Dow and DuPont came together as one kind of megapolis-type organization, but the strategy behind those companies coming together was that they would separate in the future into three separate organizations. Both Dow and DuPont formerly had agriculture lines of business as a part of their companies, but sort of the strategy behind the deal was that each of those three companies, Dow and DuPont, and now what we know as Corteva, would operate separately. And so our companies were together for a couple of years, but there was no intentional strategy for those companies to spend the resources to really kind of rebrand and re-identify in the marketplace. And so what you had was, on the slide that you can see here, the Dow corporate website, and this is what it looked like even a couple of years after the acquisition had taken place and sort of the future divestiture was declared. So for Corteva, our challenge was quite a bit different from either Dow or DuPont in that we really needed to disconnect from our predecessor companies, which are these big known global brands of Dow and DuPont. And this is what the DuPont corporate website looked like in 2017. Again, after we had been together for a couple of years, and before we had separated into our three logical entities. And as we were creating an entirely new identity for the company away from Dow and DuPont's former agricultural businesses, we were launching Corteva, and our goal was really to turn the heritage of a 200-year-old startup, from the predecessor companies of Dow and DuPont. And here's what the old career site looked like for Dow. And on the next slide, here's what the old career site looked like for DuPont. And because we were forming a new company, we really had the opportunity to leave all of this messaging behind and start fresh with all new branding and content. And here's what our new corporate website looks like. Our messaging focuses on the corporate side on innovation, and this is really important for us that our new career site was really strongly connected to our new corporate website so that all of our messaging would be in sync. And as Adam said, they don't have to necessarily mirror each other exactly, but they need to reference one another. And the spinoff of the new company, Corteva Agriscience, was official as of June 1st, which, hard to believe, was just about a month ago. And here's our new career site, building on the theme of innovation and growing, but we also wanted to ensure a strong connection to our business and make sure people were very visible in that. And so our tagline became, "Growing What Matters Starts With You." And then as a company and brand, our corporate communications and marketing teams worked with external agencies to develop the overall company branding. In talent acquisition, we partnered with InFlight to build out our employment branding specifically for our career site. And we developed an employment branding guidelines and toolkits because, as I said, we're 60 days in now into our new company, and to help our recruiters launch the employment brand in a consistent way related to the consistent messaging we want in the marketplace as a new brand. So we're providing quite a bit of guidance in the early days of our launch of our new company and a new employment brand, but we expect that as that becomes more familiar across the organization and outside, that we'll loosen some of those restrictions and allow more freedom for that. But right now we're keeping a pretty tight lid on that.
Great. Yeah, both of these are strong examples of the tie between the corporate brand and the employer brand. And from a candidate experience perspective, I think the job seeker can really see that it's the same company if they click on that careers link from the corporate site and land there. And I think, Paul, what's really interesting is it's a challenge, but also, as you said, an opportunity to rebrand a company after a merger like this. And so, what a critical time to ensure that the employer brand and the corporate brand are totally aligned. And in this case, you could do that from day one.
Right. It's a rare opportunity you're given to kind of massively do that on both sides at scale.
All right. So those are some really great pointers on the content and messaging side, and even from a bit of a design perspective. So let's move into mistake number 2, which is making it hard for candidates to discover jobs that are the right fit for them. And as recruitment marketing practitioners, we want to attract the right talent, but we also want to make sure that they convert into an applicant when they are on that job description or they are reading the content on our career site. But for some career sites, it can be really hard for candidates to search for and discover those jobs. And Paul, I know you said this was one of the issues with the old career sites from Dow and DuPont. So how did you solve for this when you launched Corteva Agriscience?
Sure. Let me show just a quick example. On the former DuPont page, on the left-hand panel that you can see on the slide there, employment candidates could sort of identify different filters to help narrow down their job searches. And we often found that sometimes when candidates would pick filters for things, they wouldn't clear them out, and eventually they would sort of run out of job opportunities to investigate, and they didn't know how to reset those filters, and so therefore they would leave because they had sort of eliminated all jobs from their view, and that was not the candidate experience that we obviously wanted to provide to them. And so the other thing that I guess I would just mention is that on the Dow and DuPont side, unless somebody really knew their product portfolio and services, they really may not know that they had an agricultural business embedded in each of those companies. And so, we really didn't have that visibility in the marketplace. As we were launching Corteva, we knew from some of the research that we conducted that, candidates looking for new roles, they really like to have a lot of different options for searching. And so, on this next page, Lori, we identified some kind of career areas or categories where people could, look for jobs in kind of logical groupings. We also then created filters and then things such as maps where people could sort of identify jobs near them wherever they might be in the world. And I would lastly just point out that on the Corteva new career site, it will recommend jobs to you if you sign in with LinkedIn, up front in the process. The system has some intelligence built in there that it will present high likely jobs for you, and that's really helpful and kind of an improved candidate experience of what we've ever had before. We also focused on updating and improving our locations in Taleo. Jobs could be more easily found based on kind of target city on our career site. You can see on the slide here there are a number of filters that you can engage, but it's also very clear which ones that you've turned on so that you can also turn them back off so that you don't sort of eliminate those positions out of your view.
Great. Yeah, thank you for sharing this. This is both like a technical solution and maybe somewhat of a non-technical solution to this problem. I mean, first and foremost, awesome search capability and a really important point about the filters. And then the other slide that you had showing career areas, it's somewhat of a content solution, but this is a trend that I'm seeing more and more in career sites, is being able to have a page that talks about the career areas or the teams or the locations that then allows people to drill down from there. So those are really great tips for helping candidates discover jobs that are right for them. And Adam, tell us about your old career site, because I know it was making the same mistake, and some of the technical solutions that you implemented to improve the candidate experience.
Yeah, so 100% what you guys are saying, and one of the things that I've found is that over the last couple of years, people search in different ways, whether you're on your mobile phone or your desktop or your tablet or you're on the subway or you're sitting in front of your computer or your TV, you're looking in different ways. And so on our old career site, we made the mistake of singularly focusing on the search box. And the search box at the top was a little light in color, so it wasn't super prominent. It may have been missed as you quickly scroll down to read the content, and it didn't stay sticky as you scroll down, so you lost it in the top. But also for our business, we had 4 separate business divisions within Cox, and the way the career site was previously structured was that based on which page you were looking at would only show you that division's jobs. And so if you look today, we actually have several hundred, probably 500 technology jobs, But if you were only on that one division site, it may only show you the 100 that applied for that division, and you wouldn't know the full depth and scope of all the other opportunities that were open. So when we fast forward to how we improve that today, Lori, if you'll advance the slide for me, we are now offering a multitude of different ways for people to search. Yes, we've got the search box, which is certainly used very heavily. That search box was also connected for the Google Cloud Talent Solutions, so the accuracy is really powered by Google now, and so there's an inherent power and knowledge base within that we're very pleased with. We've also added an MOS military code to that's built into the Google platform. So if somebody's typing in their military MOS or MOC code, it'll convert to an open civilian role that we have within the company. So that is also a nice additional feature that allows people to search in different ways. Additionally, we've loaded these Google Maps that show live locations of all the current openings in each market. So if you're a person who is very visual, maybe this is a little bit easier for you to drill down into your particular city or your market, and you can scroll in and zoom in and find the 5 openings that maybe we have in your market. This also works very well if you're considering relocating. So if you're currently living in Kansas, but you'd really love to move to California and you're just waiting for that one perfect opportunity to open up, by looking at the map, it's a much easier visual way to see where those jobs are open and in which markets. Like Paul mentioned, we also have a careers area section on our site as well that has individual icons. So if you're just trying to search by a big bucket category, you can do that as well. So essentially we're giving people more options of how they can search based on what their preferences are, and we see all of these features being used on our site today.
Great. I love this map search capability. It seems really effective. And as you mentioned, some people are looking for jobs by location, and they're also like a visual person, so this makes it really easy to find those jobs. And easy for military to find jobs at Cox Enterprises, so well done. These are some great tips here. All right, so let's look at mistake number 3, which is friction in the apply process. And I think from the candidate's perspective, this is probably the biggest issue that they have. And this would be the thing that they would say upsets them the most, frustrates them the most about being a candidate and specifically applying for a job. So why do we make it so downright hard for them to complete an application? Well, I mean, of course, I don't think that any of us really sets out to do that. And a lot of it happens because of our HR and our recruiting systems. So some of the ways that we can create frustration for candidates is when there is an inconsistent form experience, like when they sign up for your talent network and then they apply for a job, the forms are actually coming from 2 different systems. The first might be your CRM or recruitment marketing platform, and then the job itself is coming from your ATS. And so a lot of times you're asking for their information all over again, which is a point of frustration. Or when they go to apply and the first thing they're being asked to do is to create a username and password. Or if they're applying for a job a second time and then they have to remember what that username and password was, which is really not likely at all. Another issue is that our career sites can actually be multiple systems. So the ATS, CRM, job search, referrals. So for some people, their career sites have kind of grown up, by a collection of different tools that they've added, but unfortunately creates a really disjointed experience for candidates. And it can feel like one part of the company isn't talking to another part when really, in fact, it's all the same department. It's recruiting. And a fourth issue that Paul and Adam and I talked about was not being mobile friendly. And maybe the front end pages are, but then when a candidate looks at the job description, the mobile experience breaks completely. And finally, the application itself can sometimes be so long, the candidates just stop. They just abandon trying to finish the application because it's asking for all kinds of information that, if you think about it, is really unnecessary at that stage of the candidate journey. So that's a lot of points that can cause frustration. And Adam, I know we could have added a lot of other ways too when we talk about the apply process, but I think this list is long enough for us to discuss for today's webinar. So tell us, what were some of the application issues with your old career site, and how did you solve them?
Yeah, so essentially what you're saying, Lori, is dead on. I mean, the fact of the matter is most of us dislike our ATS, if I'm being kind. Some people use the word hate. But most people have a challenge with their ATS in one way or another, but all candidates do. Every candidate comes in, and when they're ready to apply, they get frustrated. These systems were built decades ago, and most of them have not modernized. And so when you think about the experience, we talked a little bit at the top of the hour of the experience with your branding. Now think about the experience from your career site to the point where you click apply and you come here. So this is a totally disjointed experience, and this is what ours used to look like. So this is our native Taleo experience within the ATS. And so in working with our partners at InFlight, we've completely redesigned that ATS apply experience to this. So now when candidates come from our careers website and they click that apply button, there's continuity in that experience. There is a familiar feel in the branding and the experience, and there's a simplicity in what they're seeing as well. At this particular point, we've redesigned the first initial screen of the apply flow, so we're not asking them to create a username and a password right now. We're simply asking for their first name and their last name and their email. And then we move into the application. And so by doing that, if you're able to push just that username and password, either eliminate it altogether or move it towards the end of the process, you'll see an uptick in the amount of completed applications you get, because by far the majority of people who drop off do so at this very first page when you're asking them to create some cumbersome password, and they're frustrated right at that moment because they're typing in their 8 letters and an exclamation point and some crazy combination of numbers, and then it gives them the big red X and it says it doesn't meet your guidelines. Well, I don't know what your guidelines are, and now I'm frustrated. And so from the very beginning of their apply process, you're giving them frustration. So in a similar fashion, this is what our old apply flow used to look like. So native Taleo, this is your resume upload and all of the steps that have to happen. I mean, just from a visual perspective, it just feels so old and clunky, but the actual mechanism of it is very clunky. And now try doing this on your mobile phone, and if you think it's frustrating on a desktop, you'll pull your hair out if you're on your mobile phone. And so this is what our new apply flow looks like. And so again, working with our partners at InFlight, we've had a redesign from start to finish of that process. So there's consistency in that. We lay out the expectations of how long the application should take you, so you know how much time to allocate. You've got the number of steps that are included in the application on the left sidebar here, so there's 9 different steps you have to take. It's very visually appealing. It's easy to digest. It's easy to see the instructions and to just move through the apply process. The design and the experience of that can really impact how many completed applications you're getting.
This is great, and I think making it easy to apply with a social profile is something really important to emphasize for our audience. It's an important feature, especially for candidates who are on a mobile device where they're not going to necessarily have their resume handy to import. So I think that feature is really important moving forward. And I definitely like the new candidate experience that defers that username and password requirement from Taleo. It's such a huge point of friction, as you mentioned. So Paul, why don't you share with us the ways that you wanted to avoid creating this kind of friction as you launched the new candidate experience and career site for Cateva?
Sure. So we were very much in the same place as what Adam described at Cox in terms of having that native applicant tracking system experience. That the interface was very old. It feels very process-oriented, and very often, the fields are unclear as to, what the right attributes are that people were to put in, and very often, if candidates encounter any kind of errors or things like that, they will abandon their application process right away. And so this is sort of what we, we're dealing with both at Dow and DuPont. And, one of the things that we very much wanted to do is to have that more consistent, high-quality, branded experience that made the apply process much easier. And so one of the things that we chose to do, like Cox did, was to put an overlay over the applicant tracking system. Those systems really haven't modernized in the way that most people that are using other consumer-oriented websites, are accustomed to doing. It didn't have the same look and feel, and so we were really trying to simplify that process greatly, and putting in this overlay was really helpful. And for the candidates that we worked so hard to attract to our website, we wanted to make sure that once they got there, then they would be able to complete their apply process very effectively. And also just we wanted to ensure that our entire career site, including job descriptions and every component of it, was mobile optimized, because we know from the work that we've done so far on our website that more than half of all of our applicants are coming in using devices.
Great point. Yeah, I think that that half or 50% stat that you just shared is probably consistent across most companies, but it's always important to look at the data coming from your career site. Google Analytics would be a good resource to use that would tell you what devices people were accessing when they're accessing your career site. It's funny, I spoke to a practitioner the other day who was starting a new role as a talent acquisition manager, and she said that before she accepted the role, she went through their application process 100% from her mobile phone to see where she would need to focus her candidate experience improvements once she started working there. So that's a good tip for all of us, is like, when's the last time you looked at that process from a mobile perspective? So great point, and an important place where we could reduce some friction. All right, and so our final mistake, our fourth and final mistake that we see commonly made with career sites and the candidate experience in general is failure to manage expectations. And Paul, I know this is something that you thought a lot about as well, both externally for candidates but also internally for your team. So why don't you start this one off?
Sure. So I've been in talent acquisition for a long time, and one of the things that I've learned over the many years I've been doing this is that for candidates and hiring managers, one of the really most important things we do in talent acquisition is set and manage the expectations of the people that we work with every day. And for candidates, one of the things we wanted to do is create a hiring journey page that really kind of outlines for them information about our hiring process and what they can expect when they apply for a role with us. And we really want to position ourselves in terms of our branding and our messaging and everything as being a career destination company, a very candidate-friendly organization. And when candidates interview with them, as leaders in talent acquisition, we want all the candidates to come in and have a really good hair day with us, right? And that the managers are really, torn between which of the best candidates should I choose. They always like having tough choices to make, And we want to make sure that our candidates come in and they're well prepared, they know us, and they know kind of what our process is and what we're looking for along the way. As Adam mentioned, transforming the candidate experience starts where people apply, and we put a lot of focus on that area as we've talked about. But the other thing that we wanted to make sure that we were doing as we were launching as a new organization was putting together what I refer to as a TA Skills Academy for our global team of recruiters that really outlined the experience that we intended to provide to our hiring managers and candidates as a part of the new Corteva organization. While we had always, gone to the market and hired great recruiters with great experience from great companies, we had never taken the time as an organization to kind of baseline or level set the expectations of the experience that we wanted our recruiters to provide to our hiring managers and our candidates as part of our service delivery model. And so the TA Academy really focused on kind of 4 major areas. One was really around improving consultation skills, and then some key kind of critical areas such as doing the intake of the position at the time the requisition is opened. How do you effectively source for candidates with all the options that are available to us today? How do we do that, and what are the more effective means, and what tools do we have as an organization, whether it be subscription or otherwise, and what tools and tricks have we learned also from peers and colleagues who have been doing this work for many years, creating that opportunity for a conversation where people could share. And then, lastly is really kind of resetting the organization for our new company as, coming from an organization of Dow and DuPont where they were very well-known household brands to moving into a new organization called Corteva, which most people in the market had not heard of. We only had a limited amount of time when we're on the phone or contacting a candidate to start talking with them, explaining to them who we are and why they would want to talk to us. And so we wanted to make sure that we had that consistent branded experience.
This is great. Thank you, Paul, for sharing the strategy for your TA Skills Academy. It's so important to ensure that everyone on the team knows what kind of candidate experience you want to deliver. So I think failure to manage expectations sometimes can start internally. So that was a great tip to share. Adam, how are you managing expectations at Cox?
Yeah, in a similar fashion, I'll tell you, it kind of surprises me a little bit, but candidates today still really don't understand how the recruiting process works. We sit in this world day to day, and I think we're just so in the weeds that it is second nature to us. But most people applying to a job, so many of them actually don't know what happens next. It's that proverbial black hole. So one of the things that we're actually putting in place, probably in the next 2 weeks or so, is this graphic that you see on screen, which walks through what the application and interview process looks like, really in a step-by-step way. So it's high level, but it gives them enough information to know what each step is and where they are in the process as they think about the communications and the outreach that they've received already. And it'll give them some insight into what our total process looks like from start to finish. So that's something we're working on and we'll be launching here later this month. As well, Lori, on the next slide, a couple other pieces that we're working on is in tandem with that graphic, we're updating some of the auto-reply emails that come out of the ATS. So as a person actually applies, the auto-reply that you may have set up that simply says, thank you for your application, we got it for job number 1, 2, 3, 4. In this instance, we're actually saying, if you're interested in what actually happens next, check out our process document and the link back to our careers website. So we're leveraging those two things together and giving candidates more information about what the process looks like and giving them more information at their fingertips. In a similar vein, we're creating a better candidate experience for them to actually check on the applications that they've already submitted, which you see here in this screenshot. So if you've submitted an application to the product manager role, you can go back in, view your application, view a status of that application, and get more details in a self-service type of way. And then lastly, from a managing expectations perspective, we talk a lot about the candidate, which we should, but let's also manage expectations internally within our own teams and our own organizations. If you're rebranding in any way, if you're launching a new careers website, if you're making major changes to any of your tools and technologies, make sure you're connecting with your partners, giving them a heads up, seeing what impacts it may have on them. But there may be some opportunities to partner more closely. So particularly in the marketing comms space, your technology partners, if there are integrations that need to happen, if there are other projects that impact one or the other, make sure everybody's on the same page and they know what's going on, because the last thing that you want is a surprise at the end of the day. In this instance, surprises are really bad.
Great point. Especially when you're working on a career site update. I mean, I think the career site is the most visible thing that we do in talent acquisition. And so when you're in the process of making a major upgrade to it, it's really important to communicate with everybody and tell them what they can expect and also what you expect from them. So that was awesome. Thank you, Adam and Paul. Those were great tips, and I really appreciate both of you being so humble in sharing the candidate experience mistakes that your old career sites were making and letting us in on how you solved them. So that was fantastic. Okay, so let's answer a few questions from our audience. So the first one is, Paul, if it's okay, I'll start with you. We shared a lot of ways to improve the candidate experience with our career site. And so someone is interested in building a business case for these kinds of career site upgrades, which often involves technology changes. What advice would you give them?
So just two things quickly. I would say that, in the marketplace in general, it's pretty well known through just sort of public media sources that unemployment is at historic lows. And so, all companies are really competing for talent very, strenuously. And so in order to have, an experience on your website that kind of competes with others in your marketplace, I think that's one place to start. The other is kind of looking at your data, and you made a really good point earlier when you were talking about the frequency of visits to the career website. At least at the companies that I've been a part of throughout my career, the career sites are probably visited 100 times for every one time that the corporate websites are. And in terms of the length of time that people spend on it, part of it is because of the transactional nature of applying. But that tends to be the pass-through, the corporate site to get to the career site. And so a lot of times just the frequency of the visits and the power that you have in terms of people that are looking at jobs, the abandonment rate at which people are dropping out of the process because they may encounter something that is difficult or error-prone or what have you. And those are great places to start in building your business case. And then, as you mentioned, having people actually go and just try to experience what a candidate experiences is oftentimes enough to kind of convince people that, wow, that is we are falling behind. So those are just some ideas.
Okay, fantastic. And this would be a question maybe for both of you. Where on your website do you post the summary of what candidates can expect? So, Paul, I know you showed us hiring journey, for example. How do candidates find that? So
it's on our main careers page. So if you were to go to corteva.com/careers, you would find then across the top tab, hiring journey is one of those tabs on the career page, and it's very prominent, and we want our candidates to be able to find that. so that they know what to expect throughout the process.
Okay. So for you, it's like top-level menu item right there for people to find. Okay, awesome. And Adam, you mentioned that you link to this page, or you will be linking to this page within the email that gets sent after someone applies. Is the page visible now on your career site, and how do candidates find that?
Yeah, our page isn't live yet. It'll be done at the same time, and it'll be similar to what Paul mentioned. We're looking at top-line navigation. Depending on how much content or how many tabs you have there, there are other opportunities to call that out. What I would consider doing is kind of in that top header area. You can do call-outs for already applied, question mark, read our FAQs, or see what happens next, et cetera, et cetera. So depending on how much space you have on the site, there may be some different opportunities to place that in the right spot.
Okay, makes sense. That's great. Yeah, and I'm seeing this more and more in careers sites. So I think this is absolutely a page that everyone should be thinking about adding to their career site, because we do a lot in the Rally community about ways that we can improve candidate communications, and your candidate experience is really a communications experience. So think about that. All right, we had another question that just popped in, and the question is, were there any issues with overlaying Taleo, modifying that application login? Maybe, Adam, you could address this one.
Yeah, I mean, it is a technical process, so you definitely have to have your technical teams involved. The physical work that we had was actually done through InFlight. We did not have issues going through that. It's really one of the things that InFlight has as a core strength, is overlaying on top of an application process like that. And so there are some limitations with what you can do in the overlay. So from a design perspective, you can probably do almost anything, but it is limited to representing what you have in the underlying application in Taleo. And what I mean by that is, in your native ATS application, if you're asking 50 questions, all they're going to do is display those 50 questions in a more beautiful way. But it's still up to you to say, should we really ask 50 questions, or should it be 12?
Good point. Good point. I think we need to push back a lot on that. I mean, there's always a tendency to ask more information up front. We can be the gatekeepers there of let's ask the minimal to capture the candidate contact information, and then we can always improve their record by asking them for more information down the line. And so, Paul, this would be a good question for you, which is, if I'm planning to make content improvements to my career site, and that's maybe going to happen next year, is there something that they could do this year that could help improve the candidate communications?
Yes, I think we've talked about quite a few technical solutions, but there are a lot of things that are what I would say probably more readily available opportunities for us. And I know as we were going through and kind of standing up our new organization, it gave us the opportunity that personally I had not taken in many years, to really review all of the communication that existed in Taleo that fired off both to our hiring managers as well as our candidates, and make sure that we knew what all of those things were, what triggered them, and make sure that they were on message and on brand. It wasn't a big dollar investment. It did take time to do that and the rewriting of it, but it was well worth it. And we've gotten a lot of positive comments. We've also figured out there were communications that had built up over many years that we weren't even using anymore. So it gave us a chance to go through that and really refresh that as well.
Yeah, great point. It's almost like that's a quick win. I know it requires a little bit of effort, but get that done first, and then and you can start to deliver some results right away just by improving that candidate communications as you're working on the deeper issues that you might have with your career site. And someone asked if you have any advice for those using ADP as an ATS, and I know both of you use Taleo, so I wasn't sure if you have experience prior with ADP and whether this kind of overlay could work with ADP as well.
I actually don't have experience with ADP, so unfortunately I can't answer that question.
I believe that at least in-flight, they've got experience with lots of different technologies from HRIS systems. So I think the process is very much the same, and it is just a matter of pointing and putting that overlay over the existing interface.
Yeah, good. Yeah, so if you've got an old ATS, this is something definitely to consider. Okay, well, great. So I think that's probably all the time that we have for questions. And I just want to thank you again, Paul and Adam. Thank you for all the great advice that you shared today. And for those in our audience who asked some questions, I hope that you learned a lot. And I hope that you're walking away with some ideas to prioritize the candidate experience improvements that I know you really want to make. So thank you again, and have a great rest of your day, everyone.